Well, guys, as Thanksgiving approaches just in a couple days, we know that it's going to be a time of food and fellowship and fun. And, often at the end of the year, I don't know about you, but for me, it really becomes a time of reflection. As I look back all the way to January and the months behind us, in one way, it's like I take an inventory of what happened and then also begin to look forward to what is to come with great enthusiasm and excitement. But one of the things that I realize that as I reflect on every year, I realize that there are standout moments in each year. I realize that maybe there's 2, 3, 4, 5 things that happen that I'm like, wow, that was a real standout moment. Maybe some of you got a new job. Maybe there was a new baby that was born. You started a new ministry, or maybe there was a closed chapter. For some of you, maybe it was that bucket list. You went to, that vacation that you had always dreamed about. And you look at the year in total and you go, man, there was, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 standout moments. And what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about the other 340, 350 days that maybe weren't such a standout moment for you. As a matter of fact, these were the days where you were just mowing the lawn. Maybe you were shuttling kids back and forth from school. You were packing lunches. You were making meals. You're out there washing the car. And these are these mundane and really at times seem to be insignificant moments that I want to call the grind. How many of you know what it is to be in the grind? Anybody out there? You know what it is to be in the grind. And what I want to do as we approach Thanksgiving this week with a heart of gratitude, a heart of thanksgiving, I want to talk about living a life where you can actually have gratitude. You can have thanksgiving in your heart during a time of being in the grind. I want to talk to you about those 360 days where you're just doing monotonous, insignificant tasks. Is anybody with me this morning? Amen. So, as you've already seen, the message today, the title is In the Grind. And for most of my life, a large part of my life, I want to share something with you. And I think that most of you would agree, or you could at least see where I'm coming from. I've lived with the illusion that there's something around the corner that's coming, something that's coming that matters more than what I'm doing right now. Have you ever lived with that illusion in your mind that there's something bigger that's just around the corner? I'm not really sure what it is. I don't know what I'm being called to. I don't know what's coming, but I'm pretty sure that it's bigger than what I'm doing right now. I'm sure that there's many of you that have felt that way, that there's something in my future that awaits that's going to bring meaning and fulfillment. There's something that's just about to happen that brings significance or a sense of destiny being fulfilled in my life. And here's the challenge, and here's the warning and the caution that I have for you today, is that we can live with this mindset. And if I get my next slide up, is what I want most is not here, it's out there. And see, in a lot of us, that's the way we live. We live with that mindset that what I'm hoping for, what I'm believing for, I'm not experiencing it right now, so it's out there, it's not here. And here's the trouble with this kind of thinking, this line of thinking, is that it becomes almost impossible to be grateful in the grind when you're always thinking that there's something better than what you're living in the moment. Now, I understand, I get it, that there's dreams, there's hopes. I get it that sometimes we're in some very difficult situations and times, and we're like, man, God, would you just please deliver me from what I'm facing right now? But my hope is that today, as we work through the scriptures and as we work through this message, that the Holy Spirit would remind you that you truly can be grateful in the grind. That you don't have to live from vacation to vacation, from achievement to achievement, from amassing one thing to another. That you truly can have this sense of destiny, even in the mundane. Is there anybody that would like to know how to do that? Anybody? Come on, I got 3. Yes, we're on the right path this morning. See, Veronica and I, we met when we were 13 years old. We started dating when we were 14. Young people, do not do that, okay? It's not wise, okay? But it worked out for us. But here's the thing, is that I remember that I didn't realize at the time, and she didn't either, that we could have worked on a great relationship and could have been very hopeful in the moment. But we were always thinking, when we get married, then this relationship's really going to take off. When we get married, like all the problems that we're having right now, like all of those are going to go away, and we're going to live that fairy tale life that Disney promised us, right? We weren't thinking about the now. We were always thinking about what was to come. I remember when we had our 2 children, our kids are not even a year apart. They're, hey, when we got married, we did the married things. Come on, man. And so we had 2 kids within 1 year's time, 11 months. For 5 days, our kids are the same age. And I remember thinking to ourselves, man, when those 2 babies are finally out of diapers, like we're going to eat again. Like we're going to have money to go to Jack in the Box, baby. Come on, man. Things are going to get better. So here we are with the blessing of these 2 young children, but we in our minds were wishing the season away. See, that's the danger. Is that when we're always thinking that it's something out there, it's not about here, it's about there. It's not about now, it's about sometime later. What we do is we end up wishing away the season that we're in right now. Some of you high schoolers in this room, I just can't wait to graduate high school because when I get to college, then everything is going to make sense. Everything's going to get better. And so you're wishing your now away in pursuit of later, which then makes it difficult to be grateful when you find yourself in the grind. I remember when we first planted this church a while back, and we had COVID restrictions. And we were like, man, when we can finally do church without a mask, that would be great. When we're not having to run those machines with foggers, with disinfectants in here, man, then that's going to be amazing. When everything opens back up, then this church is really going to take off, and we're going to fulfill what God's called us to do. See, it's not about not having dreams and hopes, but you can see that we could start complaining. Oh, man, we got to wear masks. Oh, man, there's restrictions. Oh, man. And it starts to attack the ability to be thankful and to have gratitude in your heart, even when you're in the grind. We find ourselves as a church in this rented space. And it would be easy for us at some point to go, man, we're in the theater, but I look forward to the day. Then the church is really going to be what it was called to be when we get out of that silly theater and we have our own place to call home, our own permanent facility. Then Hub City will be what God's really called it to be. And then we can live in this place without having gratitude for what we have. We've been blessed here, and our church is growing. This church started with 60, 65 people a little over a year ago, and now there's 2 services, and it's becoming a family here, and God is doing great things, and we're influencing our city, and people are experiencing the hope of Jesus Christ. But listen, if we get focused on the wrong thing, then we can be like, oh, man, well, we just got to get into a new building, and not seeing all of the great things that are already happening. Are you guys with me this morning? Are you guys alive? You awake? Man, I think first service was a little more alive than this. It's dropping down, yes. So when we find ourselves in the grind and the mundane, it's easy to feel like what we desire most is not here, but it's somewhere out there. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that something is coming that is more important than what we're doing right now. And we will find ourselves wishing away the season that we've been called to in anticipation of the next. And as I mentioned, ultimately what it'll do is it'll make it impossible for you to be grateful in the grind. But what you'll realize when you're wise, and I believe this is a room of wise people, is that you'll realize that after every pursuit, after every achievement, after every level up, there's always more to pursue. There's always more to achieve. There's always more levels. And for some people, it never ends. Something is out there that I don't have. I've got to get it. And when I do, then everything will be great. And culture feeds us to the max. How many of you remember this question as a child? What are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do when you grow up? You're talking to like a 3-year-old. They want to be, whatever, and that probably won't even exist by the time they grow up. And I see high schoolers, they're so stressed out. People are like, what are you going to do? It's like, man, like you still think like a child often, and you just want to be around your family and home. And they're like, what is this decision? What are you going to become? And that's going to define the rest of your life. And that is the way that culture pushes that onto people. And then you live an entire life, all through junior high, all through high school, all through college, in your mind, never being grateful for the season that you're in because you have been told that what you're living is not the best. It's still out there. And we can't remain grateful in the grind. And we need to talk about this today. This is really important. This is really important. So I want to give you a grind-busting verse. Is anybody down with a grind-busting verse? I don't know if anybody's ever defined that, any part of Scripture as a grind-busting verse, but I am. And so I want to take you to something because we're going to talk about Paul today. And this is what Paul has to say. This is a grind-busting verse. He says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Let me read this again. So whether you eat or drink, that's pretty monotonous, right? I mean, that's not like a big deal. It's like, man, like, what'd you do today? Oh, I ate. Oh, man, I ate, man. That was really tough. No, it's not tough. And some of us can go 4 or 5 meals without eating or drinking. But listen, it says, so whether you eat or drink, he's saying like in the small stuff and also in the big stuff, whatever you do it all for the glory of the Lord. I want you to see today that as we dive into this and we really tackle and unpack this understanding, that this is the roadmap to living a life of gratitude and a life of thanksgiving. That whatever you do, whether it's small stuff, whether it's big stuff, whether you're changing diapers, whether you're doing big things, starting a new career, or maybe you leveled up and now you were once a worker and now you're the boss, whatever it is, small or big, you can know this, that we do it all for the glory of God. That changes everything. That is a grind-busting verse because if you're just focused on the grind, I'm tired of being stuck in traffic. I'm tired of shuttling these kids and waiting in those long lines for them to come out so I can pick them up from school. I'm tired of making lunches. I'm tired of making dinner. I'm tired of the groceries. When you realize that even in the small things that you're doing, those things can all be done for the glory of God. It busts the grind. It changes it. Your perspective shifts, and all of a sudden, insignificant things actually become very valuable. And so this is the secret. Let me tell you a little secret. The secret is that if you really want meaning and significance in life, you do whatever you do for the glory of the Lord. And I have 2 questions that I just want to pose to you today. 2 questions that I believe that can transform the way you think about life. Here's the first one. What if the work is the reward? See, we always look for outcomes because by nature, we are achievers. We're always looking to finish college. We're always looking to climb to the top. We're always looking like that is the reward, that when I get that fat paycheck, when I get that great opportunity, when I finally seal the deal and I marry that girl of my dreams or that guy of my dreams. Not me marrying it, but I'm speaking as a woman in that point. But here's the thing is that we're always looking for the outcome to be the reward. But what if we change our thinking and say, what if the work is actually the reward? And the second question I have for you today is this, is what if the prize is in the process? So what if the work is the reward? And what if the prize is in the process? Can you see how this can bring a heart of gratitude into every situation? Because no matter what I'm facing, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what I'm working at, the work can be the reward. The process that I find myself in is actually the prize. It's not just about outcomes. It's, God, what are you doing in this moment? God, what are you leading me to? And I find myself in this place, and everything about this place, I want to escape it. I want to go. I want to move on. And God is saying, listen, if you move on, you don't get the prize because the prize is in the process. If you move on and you stop doing the work and you give up and you give in, understand that the reward was actually in the work. It wasn't in the final outcome. But we live with this illusion that it's all about achieving, it's all about the finish line, when God does far more in the work and in the process. See, the Apostle Paul, he had a great understanding of this, and I want you to go with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He says this, for I am the least of the apostles and do not even deserve to be called an apostle because I persecuted the church of God. So Paul lays this out. He says, listen, I'm so grateful that I get to be called an apostle, and I really shouldn't be. And if you're going to call me one, then make me the last one, because I have some dirt in my history. I was actually a persecutor of y'all, of you Christians. Like, I had people, maybe I didn't do it myself, but I had people that were killing Christians at my word. And how many of you got a history and a little bit of dirt in your past that you're kind of like, hey, like, this should have been a disqualifier? But it's not, because it's not about you, it's about God. And listen to this, he says, by the grace of God, I am what I am. He's saying it was by his grace. It wasn't by what he achieved. It wasn't by his own work. It wasn't by what he did. It was by the grace of God. He says, I am what I am. I hold this title as an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ because of what he did, not what I did. And it says, and his grace to me was not without effect. Guys, this is so important that you get this. What Paul is saying is that what Christ did on the cross, it was not without effect. What he's saying is it affected my life so richly. It transformed me. It transformed everything about me. So this is how he's laying this out, saying, listen, I don't deserve to be where I am, but I am here because of the grace of God. And I want you guys to know that what God did, it was not without effect. It affected me incredibly. And I believe that this room is full of people that can say the same thing, that if it wasn't for the grace of God, you wouldn't be who you are today, and that the cross was not without effect in your life. It's made a huge difference. Come on. But then he goes on to make this really powerful statement when it comes really to the work being the reward. He says, no, I worked harder than all of them. Sounds like he's bragging, huh? He says, no, I worked harder than all of them. He says, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. So in this thought here, I don't believe that he was complaining. I don't believe he was bragging. I believe that he was just simply stating facts. He says, I worked harder than everybody. Would you guys imagine with me real quick? So imagine that Hub City Church, we start this podcast. Just a little hypothetical story here. We start this podcast, and this week's guest is going to be Paul the Apostle. So we sit down with him, put our little headphones on, stand in front of our microphone. And if I was to ask the Apostle Paul, hey, would you unpack this thought? What thought? The thought that you worked harder than all of them. I believe that this is the way that the interview would possibly go. Paul would say something like this: I didn't do it on my own, but God's grace was working in me. While others went to bed early, I stayed up a little bit later. While others slept in, I got up a little bit earlier. When most sought comfort, I realized that the work wouldn't always be comfortable. When beaten, I pressed on. When rejected, I pressed on. Shipwrecked, cold and scared in the middle of the ocean, I pressed on. When others turned back, I kept going. When I was bit by a venomous snake, I shook it off and I pressed on. While others took shortcuts, I always worked to do the right thing. While in prison, I kept working. I wrote letters of instruction and encouragement to the churches that we had planted. I worked harder than everyone else. See, Paul found himself in times just like you and I. Times that were hard to be grateful for. Things were happening to him that were hard to be thankful for. Thank you, Jesus. I got bit by a snake that should have killed me. It's like, no, he wasn't thankful for that. He wasn't grateful for the snake. He wasn't grateful for a close friend named Barnabas that basically parted ways with him. He wasn't grateful for Demas, who turned his back on the faith and went back home and just forsook God. He wasn't grateful for all these things, but we do know this, that he was able to remain grateful in the grind. And how? Because I believe this, that we can gather that Paul was never wishing his current season away. Because his reward, he found his reward in the work. How did that happen? Because everything that Paul did was for the glory of the Lord. He took the bite for the glory of the Lord. He was shipwrecked for the glory of the Lord. He was beaten and stoned and left for dead, laying there in the streets for the glory of the Lord. Are you catching this morning, Hub City Church? That it's for the glory of the Lord. That is a grind-busting verse. It's a different kind of passion that was inside of the Apostle Paul. And he wasn't wishing these times away. So he stayed grateful. He realized that the work was the reward. He realized that the prize was in the process. And my question to you today is, what can you declare right now a task for the glory of the Lord? What is it that you're facing right now that just seems insignificant, seems monotonous and menial? What is it that's in your life? What kind of diagnosis are you facing right now? What kind of financial burdens are you facing right now where you can say, you know what, God? I'm going to realize and I'm going to declare right now that this now from this day forward becomes a task for the glory of the Lord. That when I get up and I'm making those lunches and I'm actually hungry, but I'm making them for the children and for my husband or for my wife, that this task that I kind of really hate, I don't enjoy, I'm going to declare that this is now a task for the glory of the Lord. That when I got to fight through traffic to drive an hour away or whatever it is that you're facing, can you declare that this task is now for the glory of the Lord? That God, I'm not waiting for something that's out there. God, that I'm embracing what you have going on right here and right now. Then you begin to have this heart just like Paul had. And I want to just talk to you about another level that is going to help you remain grateful in the grind. And it's this. This is something else that Paul did. Is that Paul's passion was right. See, the passion, if you declare that every task, everything that you're walking through is now for the glory of God. Repairing a relationship. Believing for healing in your body. Believing for a breakthrough in whatever area. If you declare that task, that the time that you're putting into prayer, time into study, time into connecting with you, if you declare that is now a task for the glory of God, what you're doing is you are putting God first, and you're putting the stock in the right passion. Because what you have to understand is that right passion leads to the right purpose. Let me say it again, that the right passion will lead to the right purpose. See, often people's passions are not for the things of God. It's not to put God first. It's to make themselves first. It's for me to finish the career that I want to finish. It's for my desires. It's for my plans to be fulfilled. And the wrong passion will always lead to the wrong purpose. It leads to a dead end. It leads to a ladder just leaning up against a wall going nowhere. But when you start with the right passion, God, I'm committing this thing for your glory. Whew. Man, you're starting it off right, and it's going to lead you to the right purpose and to the right place. See, Paul had the right passion, and that's what allows him to say something like this in Acts chapter 20. He says, however, I consider my life worth nothing to me. See, he was not pursuing his own selfish desires. He says, I consider my life worth nothing to me. He's not saying I'm suicidal. He's just saying, I don't value this life like maybe others would. And he says, my only aim, he makes it really clear, my only aim is to finish the race and complete the task. What's he saying? I want to do the work. I want to do the work that you've called me to. I want to be in the middle of the process because I know that that's where my prize is. And so he says, I want to complete the task the Lord has given to me, or the Lord Jesus has given to me. And it says, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace. He was on task. He was on mission, as you and I have been called to be on task and on mission. You find the right passion. You start with the right passion. It's going to lead you to the right purpose. And what purpose does is that purpose helps us feel passionate about ordinary things. What it does is things that seem to be insignificant then become valuable. That's what passion does. I mean, I've watched young moms, and they're passionate about raising those little babies and taking care of those little babies, right? And changing the diapers. And sometimes people are like, oh, I could never do that. And you're like, I'm passionate about this baby. I'm passionate about the purpose that God has for this little life. And it is a joy to me to raise this child. It is a joy for me to spend time with this child. Why? Because your passion is leading you to purpose. Right passion equals right purpose. And Paul was passionate about completing the task that God had given him. Listen to what he says. I love the imagery that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians 9:24 when it talks about being locked on the passion, on the purpose, doing the work, being in the process. He says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? He says, run in such a way as to get the prize. He's saying work. Work, not as one who's aimless. Remember what he said, like I only have this one desire, not this aimless desire. He says, man, I've got a focused desire. It's to do whatever I do for the glory of the Lord. What is that? What is it I'm called to? To finish the task, to finish the thing that God's called me to. What is that? It's to share the gospel. It's to share the good news. That's what his passion was. So he was running to win. And you and I can find that same power on the inside of us because it's not a power that is in like our own strength. It's the grace of God being in us and upon our lives and helping us accomplish what it is that he's called us to do. He continues on in 9:26. He says, therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. There's that aimless word again. He says, I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. He's not a shadow boxer. He's swinging to connect. Why? Because he realizes that the work is the reward. So he's doing it with all that he's got to do, and I believe that we can do the same. So church, what I say to you today is don't wish away the season that you find yourself in today. Don't wish it away. Because your right passion is going to lead you to the right purpose. You know, I love the fact that I get to be a part of this church. I love the fact that I get to do what God's called me to do alongside others that are doing what God has called them to do. And could we be a people that stop thinking that greatness is out there and missing the greatness that's happening right now? It's not coming. It's already here, church. So when you see these people in the children's ministry rocking babies, that's not without purpose. They're rocking world changers. They're rocking the next generation of preachers and worship leaders and entrepreneurs. They're rocking the next politicians that are going to keep the laws and the rules in the right place, that keep it free to preach the gospel here in this great country. Do you realize that there's a generation that's being raised with seems insignificant? It seems like these people are not seen, but yet they are doing a great work. And the reward is in the work that they're doing. When I look at the team that shows up here when the trailer drops at 6 a.m. and there's people setting up sound systems and lights and setting up kids' rooms and everything that you see, the reward is in their work. And many of these people are in a process, and that they're finding the prize is actually in the process. As we're emptying ourselves out and allowing God to fill us with himself, when we're emptying out selfishness and we're giving for the betterment of someone else, when we're in the streets praying for people and we're feeding them every single week, giving people groceries and doing all the things that we do, you never know the significance of the impact that is being made when people are committed to find the reward in the work. To be grateful in the grind and not wish away the season that they're in, but say, God, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, this is great and this is not so great, but I'm going to commit all of it to the glory of God. So let's be grateful in the grind. And one last verse that I just want to share with you today in Psalm 118, verse 24. It says this, and I hope that this is the way that we can live our week out and turn it into a month and maybe even a year, and this becomes the meditation of our heart when it comes to being grateful in the grind. It says, this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. What a thought. So if it's always out there and not here, if it's always later and not now, it's hard to remain joyful and to be glad in your day. But when you wake up every single day with the intention of saying, I'm going to be glad because this is the day that the Lord has made, and I'm going to rejoice in it. How do I do that? I commit everything I do unto the Lord.